Go. Shh. This is CJ.
Age, gender.
For Hentails, Hanoi.
Okay, so being American obviously means that foreign affairs to me means America. So this is a story about America. Forget the Olympics, forget ambassadors, CNN, United Nations, don't even think about the World Cup. Turn off the news, get rid of your newspapers, take your finger off the mouse, stop clicking. American international relations is much simpler than sources, research, and facts. It's about guts, glory, and body slams. It's about the history of the WWF, and specifically, one man whose cooperation in the propaganda machine has forever changed foreign affairs. The WWF was the American Idol of the 80s. WWF stood for World Wrestling Federation. This name didn't fool anyone. While wrestling was thriving around the world, this was a league created by the USA, for the USA, in the USA. Think NASCAR races and working class heroes. Going to a match was a physical, visceral experience for the fans as much as the wrestlers. The shows were crutches for people who wouldn't or just couldn't yet choke hold someone themselves. So WWF personalities were the avatars of the 80s. Favorites were based less on actual winning statistics and more on showmanship and storytelling. And what entertained average Americans more than seeing their stereotypes take one another on in full, bulging flesh and blood? Well, we'll never know because the WWF brought them a cast full of weird, wacky foreigners to keep them screaming and shouting throughout the decade. If only all political theater was this popular. So even the CIA didn't expect the Iranian Revolution in 1979. It issued a statement earlier that year that Persia is not in a revolutionary situation, but the WWF was on top of it. Its first instance of remarkable international foresight came during 1979's Battle Royal at Madison Square Garden, which featured the debut of a new charismatic talent. This man spent 10 years in the USA as an assistant coach for the US Olympic wrestling team. He competed in lower profile matches and worked hard to earn some titles before getting discovered by the WWF. If the crowd knew about this American dream story, then they weren't impressed. All they saw that night was a man sporting a handlebar mustache, curled wrestling boots, trunks that read a foreign country's name, and a Mr. Clean bald head under what looked like a tablecloth, and headband that was really awkward. He proudly showed off his birthplace, Iran, by draping its flag over his muscles. And almost immediately, the WWF had its new star heel, designed to rile up the crowd and create a common enemy. He played the Iron Sheik part well, and the US government had an effective gesture to entertain the masses while they dealt with more challenging matters. Anti-American Khomeini was now in power, and the former Shah was now requesting stateside health treatment for cancer. So while Carter reluctantly agreed, it led to a hostage crisis in Iran. And then a botched attempt to rescue the 52 diplomats, Operation Eagle Claw, resulted in 8 American deaths. In the US, the Iron Sheik wasn't using an Eagle Claw, but a highly effective camel clutch to crush his enemies. So do I have 2 volunteers to show the camel clutch?
I want to do.
Oh, thank you so much for the camel clutch. Thank you. Come on. So Urban Dictionary has a really good description of the camel clutch. This is Iron Sheik doing his amazing
Iron Sheik. Was he Iron Sheik?
Yes.
Can I be Iron Sheik?
Yes, of course. Okay, so you're the victim. So the opponent would be lying on their stomach on the ground, right? And the Iron Sheik would sit on their back.
Oh, Jesus.
Clutch the opponent's chin with both hands locked together and pull back in hopes of submission. Great. The Iron Sheik famously defeated champion Bob Backlund with this move, and no one has escaped. Thank you. Camel clutch. Camel clutch.
No one has escaped the camel.
No, until we'll find out who. So thanks to the Iron Sheik, Americans knew they had dangerous foreigners to deal with, and supported the government's 1980 decision to break diplomatic relations with Iran. After all, why talk or trade with people who yelled down with the USA at your beloved wrestling matches? So when the hostages were finally released 444 days later and a treaty was signed, Americans were watching Dallas and attending more wrestling matches. 2 years later, Hezbollah violence allegedly supported by Iran killed over 250 Americans in both Iran and Beirut. Then the unthinkable happened. The Iron Sheik beat American hero Bob Backlund using his famous camel clutch move to win the WWF Championship. A new era of hatred, helplessness, and fear began. So there aren't any statistics to directly link this milestone to the uptick in hate crimes or military enrollment, but it's possible that 1983 was the turning point for increases in calls for immigration control and calls for war in the Middle East. And what was the WWF thinking, and why did the Iron Sheik agree to this storyline? Well, the answer, Hulk Hogan. Blonde, bulky, and also curiously sporting a handlebar mustache, Hogan wore the colors of Vietnam, but inside had the heart of an American patriot. His Hulkamaniacs followed his 3 demandments: training, saying prayers, and eating vitamins. And then later he added a 4th, believing in oneself. His signature moves were wrestling until it looked like he was going to lose, then gaining his strength back and puffing his cheeks. Can you be Hulk Hogan? That would be really great. I don't really have a picture of this, but I do have a picture of him and the Iron Sheik and what people did to their action heroes, so I don't think this is the move, though. So his signature moves were wrestling until it looked like he was going to lose, then gaining strength back and puffing his cheeks. Okay. Yes, thank you. He then pointed at his opponents and wagged his finger as if to scold them. Yeah. Then he punched them 3 times. Nobody has to be the opponent, I swear. And then he finished them off with an atomic leg drop. Yes, their head was in between his legs. Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, good. So when Hulk Hogan replaced Backlund last minute during a 1984 championship bout, the world, or the wrestling fans, knew what was really at stake. It was good versus evil, right versus wrong, and the WWF had to make up for the failures that were taking place in the actual Middle East. Hulk Hogan was the first wrestler to ever escape the dreaded camel clutch. He went on to win the belt and to inspire millions of people up until his dreaded reality show, Hogan Knows Best. Despite numerous wrestling comebacks, the Iron Sheik has moved on. He appears on Howard Stern, the WWF of radio shows, and he rents himself out as best man for weddings. The USA has somewhat moved on as well. As of 1998, it imports pistachio nuts and carpets from Iran. But the US government hasn't forgotten wrestling's impact on the American people. When asked in 2006 if President Bush would participate in a proposed UN General Assembly debate about Iran's uranium enrichment, White House spokesman Tony Snow responded, "There's not going to be a steel cage grudge match between the president and Ahmad." So clearly the president and his staff didn't understand that if Americans had their way, all diplomatic affairs would be solved in the ring.
How do I?
That was good. Thank you, CJ.
Very good.
Rich.
Yeah. Hilarious.
I had no idea that